Otherwise known as Tarquin the Elder, Lucius Tarquinius Priscus ruled between 616 BC to 579 BC as the 5th king of Rome. The famed historian Livy tells us that Tarquin originated from Etruria in what is now central Italy, possibly Tuscany and its surrounding areas. It's also noted that his Etruscan name was actually Lucumo, meaning king, and that there may have been something of a discrepancy between his name and his actual title. Regardless, the events of Priscus's life would see him inherit his father's fortune, which would enable him to gain a significant political foothold in the Etruscan politics. But because of his father's ethnicity, possibly of Greek descent, Priscus was denied obtaining an office. It's believed that his wife Tanaquil, who was of noble Etruscan family, was unhappy with Priscus's inability to obtain office, and that she would become resentful at his stagnant social status. It's said that it's under her influence that he would move to Rome, because their combined social status would see them stand out and see them achieve more success in obtaining positions of power, because ethnicity did not play a role in who became what in ancient Roman society. A legend has it that when Priscus arrived in Rome, an eagle pinched his hat, some say it was a crown, and flew away with it, only to return a moment later and return it upon his head. Tanaquil, who was said to be trained in the art of reading signs and perceiving prophecies, interpreted this as an omen that her husband would become a great man in Rome, possibly even a king. It's understood that Priscus would earn the respect of the Roman nobility through his politeness, respect, and courteous manner, and through this, the king Ancus Marcius would invite him into his company and appoint him guardian of his own sons. When Ancus Marcius eventually passed away though, Priscus took it upon himself to address the council, otherwise known as the Comitia Curiata, an assembly of strong political members who were essentially responsible for appointing the next king. During this meeting, Priscus laid his claim to the throne, expressing that he was close to Ancus Marcius, and that he would fit the role of king far better than anyone else, including Marcius's own sons, who were still relatively young. In another version of this tale, Priscus deliberately sent away Marcius's sons on a hunting trip, and thus would not be present to lay their own claim when Priscus usurped the throne. Livy notes that one of Priscus's first and perhaps more notable acts as king was his extension of the Senate to include 100 men from minor families. Amongst these families was the family of Octavi, the same family who would one day produce the great emperor Augustus. It wouldn't be long though before the rebellious Latins began acting up again, and war was once again on the cards. Priscus made attacks on the Latin town of Apiolae, and was able to pillage the area and its surrounding civilizations, bringing back grand riches to Rome. But it wasn't just the Latins who wanted a piece of Tarquinius Priscus. The Sabine struck up a deal with 5 Etruscan cities and shed resources in the form of auxiliaries, bolstering a formidable force for which to march against Rome with. In response, Priscus increased his military effort and brought in more specialized units for which to repel the Sabine force. Ultimately, the Sabines were yet again thwarted by the Roman military machine, but a series of skirmishes on the streets would prove to be so bloody that peace talks were quick to follow so as to prevent such scenes from ever taking place again. The Sabine surrender was swift nonetheless, and in these negotiations, Priscus received the town of Colatia, whereby he appointed his nephew Ancus Tarquinius as commander of the garrison there. Tarquinius Priscus was not shy of war, and continued to test his might against the Latins, bloodying many of their cities and absorbing their towns and people into the Roman regime. This would include the Etruscan auxiliaries, who were provided to the Sabines, but the fact that this would take place would anger the Etruscans, who no doubt hoped that their contribution to the Sabine forces would see the death of Rome once and for all. Instead, Rome had only gotten stronger, and so the 5 Etruscan cities who had pledged their support to the Sabines declared war on Rome too. They would gain the support of at least 7 other Etruscan cities too, and with their combined forces were able to capture a Roman colony at the town of Fidenae, an area that would become ground zero for an imminent war. Even more blood was spilled at Fidenae, in a series of fierce and terrible battles, all of which saw Priscus getting his hands dirty as he swept across the battlefield. Legends say that he would storm the ranks of his enemies in a golden chariot drawn by 4 horses, trampling down his opponents and hacking at those who were unlucky enough to survive. Before long, Priscus and the Roman forces emerged victorious, and the Etruscan cities that had gone against him were sacked. Because of the multiple battles that took place within Priscus's rule, and the many battles that saw him victorious, the plunder he obtained would only enrich the Roman economy. There also exist legends of Priscus celebrating his triumphs by riding his golden chariot at fast speeds throughout the lands of those he'd conquered, and that he'd be seen with a golden toga with palm leaves on the tunic. He also wore an insignia of a scepter which represented military distinction, and a purple garment worn as a mantle. He also wore gilded rings, a cloak of military command, and a metal disc on his breastplate. Supposedly, these affectations were throwbacks to his Etruscan heritage. Tarquinius is also responsible for the construction of the Circus Maximus, the first and largest stadium in Rome, which was used for what was known as Ludi Romani, or the Roman Games. It would feature sporting events, but mostly chariot racing. He's also responsible for the creation of Rome's great sewer, known as the Colaca Maxima, in which was used during the Great Floods to drain the damp lowlands of Rome. Priscus's wife Tanaquil would continue to read prophecies, and would interpret an omen where she saw a slave boy sleeping with flames around his head. Onlookers would go on to douse the boy with water to save him from being burned, but Tanaquil stopped them and insisted he be left untouched until he awoke. She was uneasily obeyed, but when the boy woke up, the flames disappeared, and he emerged from the fire unharmed. Tanaquil immediately took the boy to her husband, and told him that the boy would be of great use to them in the future, and would become a protector of both their house and their family. Whether or not Priscus had any real decision over this is unknown, but the boy was integrated into their family and raised as their own. He would even be married off to one of their daughters, thus cementing his status as a royal. His name was Servius Tullius. But while Priscus's rule seemed to have been one of success and great fortune for Rome, not everyone saw it that way, most notably the sons of Ancus Marcius, who felt robbed of what they deemed was meant to be theirs. They would wait 38 years in which Priscus ruled before plotting his assassination. A riot erupted in Rome, likely orchestrated by the sons of Marcius, and during the commotion, Priscus received a fatal blow to the head. It's not known as to whether it was the sons of Ancus Marcius who had delivered the killing blow, but we know that Priscus was most certainly murdered in this encounter. But word of his death did not spread as quickly as one might think, because his wife Tanaquil pretended that her husband was merely wounded. During this confusing moment, Tanaquil was able to establish Servius Tullius as regent, up until the point where Priscus's death was officially announced. Once it was public knowledge, Servius Tullius had already assumed the role of king, having been regent, and thus the sons of Ancus Marcius were scorned once again. Through this, Servius Tullius is the only man to have become king without being elected in Roman society. Another legend has it that Servius Tullius was born the son of a prince who had fallen in battle to Tarquinius Priscus. Tullius was brought to the palace as a child with his mother as prisoners, but Tanaquil recognized the boy's greatness through a series of omens and began to prefer him to her own sons. She had him marry Tarquinia, her daughter, and it would further secure his claim as king. As always guys, if you've enjoyed today's video, then don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Until the next time guys.